Hello, and welcome to Creating Connections, Destiny Arts Center panel series. My name is Shanna Bowie, and I am going to be your host this evening. Before we begin, I want to extend additional gratitude to this evening's panelists for joining us for this discussion and giving us their energy in a time that has been extremely taxing. As artists, activists, and educators, we have been called on continuously throughout this viral pandemic and also throughout the continued racialized and violent pandemic that marginalized communities endure in this nation. It is not lost on us that while we come together to create new ways of being, Black and Brown lives are still taken from us every day by police violence. We continue to call on our elected officials to reimagine public safety in tandem with community leaders and healers in all their many forms so that we can create change together. I want to also just extend our heartfelt condolences, anger, sadness about the untimely death of Daunte Wright. And I want us to continue to acknowledge the communities that are working together to end both police violence and to stop the hate that we are seeing escalate as this pandemic starts to end and we move towards reopening. We will also begin this evening with a land acknowledgement. Land acknowledgements are a small way in which we can honor the ground we stand on and the history of our ancestors and call them into this space. We acknowledge that we live, work, and thrive on the ancestral and unceded land of the Ohlone people. We also acknowledge that the colonies, economies, and societies raised up on the lands of this hemisphere depended on the brutally forced labor of enslaved Africans. As an organization that teaches and honors art forms of the African diaspora, we acknowledge the history of creativity and innovation born of forced migration and assimilation. We acknowledge with respect the ancestors and living elders of the Indigenous and Black diasporas, and acknowledge with respect and in solidarity our Black and Indigenous neighbors and kin with whom we are creating this future. Please join me in taking some breaths together. As we breathe, we want to focus on connecting with everyone who is tuned in this evening and set an intention. We want to respond rather than react. We want to invite flexibility and change and let go of the systems that do not serve us. Let us take 3 deep breaths together. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. And inhale and exhale. Thank you. This evening, we'll hear from artists, educators, and activists who are embedded in our community and work to engage people in creative practice that recognizes the strength, resiliency, and creativity of BIPOC communities. I want to invite our panelists to join me on camera. And we are going to open with introductions. If you can introduce yourself, your work, and answer the following question. Thinking back to your experience as a young person, what was a learning experience where you felt seen and affirmed? And I'm gonna start with our very own Rashidi Omari.
What's up, Shanna? Thank you. Rashidi Omari, work for Destiny, born and raised in Oakland. I am the director of the Destiny Arts Youth Performance Company, um, mentor teaching artist at Destiny Arts, performer. Um, and I just love my community. Let's see. A time that I was from, it's funny, whenever this kind of question comes up, the same time pops in my head. It was in high school. Went to Skyline High School. And my English teacher, I believe it was 10th grade, Miss McCracken. We were talking about the prepositions, and she was like, all right, you'll have to I'll have to, talk about the prepositions. You have to deliver it in some way. And she gave us, we had the freedom to do it however we want to do it, but we all had to get up there and deliver it. And my group, we were like, we were the performers of the groups. We were like, let's do a rap. Let's do a rap. So then we was like beatboxing and rhyming. And she really she accepted it. Like she was like, yeah, that's dope. I could see that y'all, she saw us come out and what we did, and she really bigged us up for that. And that's whenever I think about a moment in time when I was really seen in school, that's the first moment that pops in my head. So holla out to Miss McCracken.
All right, I'm going to go to the next person next to Rashidi on my screen, Kriya.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Kriya Gomez. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. I'm the director of local initiatives at the Young Women's Freedom Center. I'm from San Francisco, but reside in Oakland. My children were born in Oakland. In fact, my children are Destiny alums who were blessed enough to work with Rashidi and Mika in the past. And I think for me, an example or an experience that comes up is honestly when doing community work. I think being able to be at a youth organization, experiencing being in a space that wasn't focused on education and academics, but was more centered around my experiences, and a place where there was a platform for me to have a voice was a really great experience of being seen for me.
Thank you, Kriya. Mandeep.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Mandeep, aka SETI X, Sounds of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. I'm currently teaching music production and technology at June Jordan School for Equity in San Francisco, Southeast San Francisco, Excelsior District. Formerly worked with Jail Guitar Doors, teaching music and songwriting in the Los Angeles County Juvenile Detention System. And right now we're working to build a foundation for musicians to come out of SFUSD. And when I was younger, I have a twofold answer. As an artist, I was seen and affirmed by Outkast because I saw Andre 3000 wear a turban on MTV. And when I saw a rapper wearing a turban on MTV, I was like, yo, like this person, is he Sikh, which is my background? Is he the same religion as me? Is he the same culture as me? I just had so many questions. And so I felt like I was seeing a version of myself on TV, which was really trippy because it wasn't a South Asian person. It was a Black artist, you know what I mean? And as a student, I had a project, again, 10th grade, shout out to Rashidi. I had a teacher, Miss Mystery, and she had a project, and I was like, yo, can I write a rap for this project? And she was totally embracing that whole side of the artistry that I was developing at the time. So shout out to Miss Mystery.
Aisha.
Hello, it is evening for real for me here on the land of the Massachusetts people in Boston. I'm Aisha Upchurch, aka the Dancing Diplomat. I'm born and raised from North St. Louis, Missouri, youngest of four, and grew up around drumming, call and response, dance, athletics, communal gatherings, running after the ice cream truck man in the street, jumping double dutch in between parked cars. And that's all very important to how I see myself as an artist, as an educator, as someone who's committed to create, facilitate, and design for radical change. And I get to do that in different sandboxes. One of them is as an independent artist, one is as a consultant, one is as a lecturer on education at the Harvard Graduate School of Ed. And then all the time, it's just like the same old Black girl from Northside St. Louis who still likes to jump double dutch. I'm on a mission. I keep my double dutch rope with me everywhere I travel, because you just never know when people just need to jump it out. You know what I'm saying? So in saying all of that, like the question is really, I'm sitting here thinking like, oh man, maybe I can go last, because I'm like, what is that spot? What is that space? And I really think it was in like those communal gatherings, being the youngest, being the little kid, the little sister, and just naturally realizing how intergenerational like hip hop culture is. And like, if you can whop it out at 7, if you can whop it out at 17, you belong. And I think I'm on a mission to try to replicate that ethos in quote unquote formal spaces where you can feel seen, held, heard, and human across the spectrum of age, gender, religion, race, ethnicity, ability, on down. So I'm really excited to just sup with you all this evening, if you will. That's my piece.
All right, Maddie.
Hey everybody, it's so good to be here. Thank you so much to Destiny Arts and everybody that's here and all the amazing work that y'all are doing. My name is Madeline Clifford, and I'm a writer, rapper, and a teaching artist. I've been an independent teaching artist for 10 years. I originally grew up in Seattle, Washington. I'm born and raised in the city of Seattle, Duwamish land. And I've been in the Bay Area for the past decade, teaching poetry, creative writing within lockdown detention facilities and also college campuses. And I've been to Uganda and taught. So I'm just really inspired by the power of poetic expression. And so for me, experiences where I felt like successful, I would say ones in which like my full body was like engaged in the learning process. So like all my senses, sight, taste, touch, sound, and smell. And part of the reason that was really important to me, especially, is because I have dyslexia. So for a lot of my life, I actually thought that I was incapable of learning. Like I thought there's something just innately wrong with me. I can't learn, but really it was just, I learned differently. And so when I started to like, you know, when you get to dance something out, I know Destiny knows all about that. When you get to listen to something, when you visualize it. And that's one of the things I love about hip hop culture, because it does incorporate, you know, the graffiti artist, the DJ, the MC, and the dancer. And so it kind of brings up all the different ways you can learn. So anytime I had a good experience where I felt like I fully learned some kind of concept, it was usually I learned it through moving my body or using all my different senses to learn it. So yeah, that's my offering. Thank you.
All right, Mika.
Well, that's a heck of a lineup to go last in. I want to thank you, Shanna, for everything that you acknowledged in the opening, and I want to thank Destiny Arts Center for hosting this conversation. I want to thank everybody who's hopefully tuning in, and I want to say that my fellow panelists, some of you, we've been in multiple spaces together, some just a few, some not at all, and I really honor you and am very blessed and nervous and excited and honored and humbled to be with y'all. I'm Mika. I use she, her pronouns. Also grew up in Oakland, Ohlone land, and I am a hip hop and street dance performer and teacher, as well as a facilitator and somebody who considers myself to be looking for the right ways to plug in the world to work towards anti-racism. And particularly lately, that's been looking like holding space for other white people to have accountability and talk about that. That's one of the things I've been doing. I was at Destiny as a teaching artist for the last 10 years. I just recently moved on from there, and I was also there as a young person. So that's the experience that I'm going to talk about. I was in Destiny as a young person from ages 11 to 18. And I love this question because I really wanted to sit with it, and I thought about what the experience was like and how much it affected me later as an artist and an educator, to actually be in a space as a young white person who grew up in a very multiracial communities and spaces, to actually be in an art making and creative and activist space as a young person where I wasn't centered, and I got to witness and be a part of centering people who don't share that white identity. I mean, specifically my Black community, but also other communities of color that both welcomed me in and were a part of our work at Destiny Art Center. So that's a very powerful experience. I think sometimes we think that like, maybe perhaps your identity or my identity needs to be reflected for me to feel belonging. But I think that I learned so much from belonging in a space that wasn't necessarily about centering my identity, but where I could learn the lessons about actually decentering, especially the more privileged parts of my identity. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mika. So that brings me to my first question. And I was actually thinking, while all of you were going, also about a situation where I felt affirmed, but also a situation where I recognized that there was a hierarchy in how I was learning. And I remember having a teacher who I was having an issue with. And I went to another teacher who I had a close relationship with, and I was like, I don't understand this woman. She is coming at me and I don't get it. Like, what did I do? And my teacher, he told me, well, you're really strong and you're really sure of yourself. And she is a white woman who does not know how to deal with that. And, and he didn't say it to like excuse her behavior, but it was like she hasn't thought about that. Like she hasn't thought about and processed her own issues. And so all of you are folks who are like really thinking deeply about how you work with young people. So when you're designing and planning, what are some ways that you consider your positionality and your power in the space? And anybody can go. This is now anyone's time. Or I can call on you. I am gonna call on Aisha just because I see you like right in the center of my screen. So
That's fine. It's crazy because we don't have all the same configuration. So that's fine. So I think like twofold with that. And I know like being in the room, being in the space with students, I feel like there's a lot of creative license and liberty that I feel, even with adult learners. I know that I work inside of or represent an institution, but like literally inside of my classroom door, inside of my class Zoom box, I'm like, this is a whole new land. But so I think like when I'm being asked to come in or proposing to come in and work with a school or with the organization, I'm thinking about how my identity is reading, what I pick up on. I'm an energy person. I'm also not afraid to just put it out there on the table, like, hey, are y'all bringing me in because you don't know how to like ask a white person to work with these white students or white educators? I think, we can just be free and be transparent. There's a lot of liberation and even joy in that. So when I think about like how that kind of transactional side of it is being set up and how to protect my psychological well-being, so that in the safety of the space, I feel like I'm not beholden to rules and constrictures that really are going to limit who I am and what I want to accomplish or try to foster. I'm a dancer, and I think in another life I was an amazing DJ or an amazing MC, but not in this one. However, that ethos of being the DJ is, I really think that my role and how to constantly kind of self-check my positionality is to really try to act like the DJ in the space. So any good DJ comes with crates, and you only know, you got some classics that you know you can put on to get the mood started, but it really becomes this interplay with you and whoever's in the room about what to put on next, what to hold a little longer, what to rewind, what to loop track, what to remix. And so I try to think about, how can I be the DJ in a space where I'm not centering Aisha and the identities that I prescribe for myself as a Black cisgendered woman, from a middle class to working class background, who's now in higher ed. I try to be aware that that is the label that's on this album called Aisha Upchurch, but I'm trying not to center it. And especially, I have a heart to work with young Black girls, and I have to also remember that sometimes I'm asked to come in because there's no other Black women in this space, but I don't want those administrators or the students themselves to think that my Black girl, Black womanness is the thing to be, or that we are monolithic. So I try to just keep trying to be like a DJ, want to pull back and not make my Black girl experience the Black girl experience, because that track isn't real. So just trying to be the DJ and be like, that's the thing about working on young people. They let you know when it's time to like move on. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of how I go about constantly running that, like, check yourself positionality. It's like, how can I be the best DJ in this space?
Cool. Anybody else?
Yeah. You inspired me when you were talking about the DJ, because a good DJ is also inspired by like different things, right? So they may have their genre that they play, but they also may throw in something else that's completely left field to some folks. And for me, depending on how I look, because I look slightly different depending on how long my hair is. So I used to have like locks that went down past my shoulders, and I would get different responses. There was time I would have cornrows, I would get a different response, because people try to look at me and I look one way, but I don't act the way that I look sometimes. So it's like, I walk in, like you're saying, I'm walking and I try to be my authentic self, which is pulling from all these different experiences. And I just try to, I try to show that. I don't try to, try to fit their expectation. I just walk in and there might be things that might be on point. I am always corny, though, Shanna, that is true. Which is also a thing, I made like sometimes, I just think growing up, sometimes people look at me like, you look mean, like who didn't know me, looking from a distance. I'm like, really? I look mean? And then like they talk to you like, oh, you're just kind of silly. And I was like, yeah, I'm just kind of silly. And I try to bring that, I don't try to like hold up a certain mask. I try not to. We all have our masks that we sometimes put up that we don't really realize, but I try not to hold up a certain mask. I try to bring all of my experience, and I try to just have that in the room, as like, here is another example of a person who looks like me can act, but it doesn't have to be the same. Kind of like what you're saying, like it's not the experience, it's an experience, and we are like multifaceted beings. So.
Anyone else thoughts on your positionality? I mean, there's also other things that come into it. There's the isms that happen within the classroom. There's race, there's gender, there's age, depending on what age group you're working with, or if you're working with multiple age groups. Like, how are you addressing that in the design or the facilitation of what you do? Mika.
Well, I'm actually glad that you kind of connected those. One thing I really resonated with what Aisha shared, and something I was marinating on as well, in terms of I think there's an innate power dynamic in the first place, stepping into the room. Let's say I'm older, or I'm the teacher, or I'm the holder of the space. So I think that examining that has been a really powerful process for my teaching practice. And I feel like for me, it's been the process of like moving farther and farther back. Like the more that I learn, and hopefully, or perhaps the more skillful I become, the more I can actually move a bit to kind of like the edge of my classroom and hold space for the participants and those who are a part of the program to be in the center. And that means what do they want to focus on? What do they want to talk about? What are the feelings that they're bringing into the room? What do they want to make a show about, for example, like at Destiny with the Destiny Junior Company? What are the issues that they're passionate about? What is the 8 count that they want to do? What is the song that maybe we can compromise on? No, just kidding. What do they want to listen to, and how can we incorporate all of that? So I think I can look at my positionality so many different ways as I step in. And it's also, Shanna, you brought up how that person had not self-reflected, and that was part of the problem in this dynamic. And you had somebody who shared that with you. And I think that's something that came up for me in almost every question as I kind of marinated with them, is like, I think especially if you're a white educator, and I can speak for myself as a white artist and educator, that like continuously examining myself is a very important part of my practice. I have to do deep work to look at myself and change my patterns and see what I'm reenacting, and have accountability buddies and read books and do journals with people and talk to my family. And they're just, if you are white and you're listening and you need somebody to talk to, I'm here for you. Because I think it's really important that we do that work. If we don't do that work and we think that we're going to step into any space and not reenact all of the systems of violence and oppression, then we are mistaken. And yeah, and it's a process. It's just a continuous thing. That's a journey that I'm on, I've been on, I'll stay on, and I'll keep on the whole time, because hopefully we learn more and more and we become better community members and holders of space, but we don't arrive anywhere. And I think that's true for many things, but I'll say that especially for your anti-racism journey, there's not really an arrival point. So I think I totally went on a tangent, but I think that when we examine ourselves, we step into the room in a more ready place to hold good space for a variety of different participants.
So that really resonates with me. I work with system impacted women, girls, and gender expansive youth, and a lot of the space of learning is an exchange. So I'm learning just as much about their experiences and how their experiences vary from mine when I was a young person, how their experience varies from others, how they see themselves in the conversation and the context that we're having. So I think, a couple of things that I'm always thinking about in terms of positionality is how my understanding varies from theirs, especially if like we got to move from conversation to teaching, right? Because it means that I got to make sure that I'm thinking about the way they're receiving things. I got to think that I'm not like over influencing, that that we're still in this space where like I'm making it safe for them to talk about their experiences, because right, we know that learning, especially for people of color, is experiential. And so giving people the opportunity, right, to like think about themselves in the context of an issue is super important, because of because of the community that I'm in and I work with. I think I'm also having to always think about how trauma played a part in the conversation, because we don't want to re-traumatize folks, but we want to like be able to have a safe space where folks can always be honest about the way that they move in the world. And so, yeah, I think that's really, there are places where, we talk about the difference between like, I mentioned academics, like the academic space. And I think that's one of the ways that like academic space becomes academic space, is it's not a place where we can level the playing field and have conversations around our experiences. That it sometimes gets dominated by one narrative, and then we have to think about the context in which that narrative like relates to us. So I think, it's everything in positionality to like think about how you're making that safe space.
Can I add to something that Kriya mentioned? I really appreciate what Kriya's bringing up because, yeah, for me, I started working in detention centers when I was kind of younger, like I was about like 25 or 26. And I was working actually primarily with like young men of color and also really high levels of like youth are going through trauma, like literally in the space. And so like for me, one of the things that was really illuminating for me, first of all, I would say for any educator, you definitely want to have a lot of like evaluation from like other educators with more experience. Luckily, I had a woman named Judith Tannenbaum who came and visited a lot of my classes, and she gave me a lot of really great feedback. She'd worked at San Quentin for like 10 years or something. So she knew all about the experience of being in that space. And it was a lot to navigate, but she kind of mentioned to me, like, you have a lot of structure, you have a lot of rules, you need to start asking questions. And so I started to just ask a bunch of questions. Like every single lesson was based on questions, just asking. And then it becomes kind of like Mika said, it just became a facilitation. Oh, I'm not here to tell you something. I'm here to facilitate a conversation, which by the way is extremely difficult in a lockdown situation. I'm not gonna lie to you, but it is not impossible. And I noticed like people would start to observe my classes and be like, wow, this is like, you actually brought in something rigorous for them to learn, but it was also really scaffolded in a way that everybody could like access the information. So that's one thing I would say. And then another thing that was really illuminating for me too, that I had to like really check myself is, oftentimes when we're doing work, there's trauma informed and then there's healing centered, right? And oftentimes we think, oh, okay, yep. Oftentimes we think, okay, like these youth are impacted by trauma. Let's bring in traumatic topics like slavery and, the Trail of Tears or something stressful for them to talk about. But it's like, but I had to realize my privilege is I can walk out that door. I can walk out that door. Like it's not fair for me to say like some of my students like to write about cats and like they want to be children, right? So I actually bring in a lot of, and some people might think of it without the context, might not realize like, oh, I'm actually inviting them to play, to be joyful, to remember that they're children and to remember their own healing mechanisms that they have within their selves. And so those are two areas of privilege that I really realize. And the last thing I'll say about gender is it's interesting because now I'm 34 and it's so much easier to teach because when I was a younger woman, it was very difficult to like navigate the being like, working with young men of color. But then I also, because I grew up in neighborhoods where men of color were constantly trying to talk to me all the time, I knew how to talk to them real quick. I knew, and I realized also they really just wanted to know how to talk to women. Like, how do I even talk to women? And so I kind of like punked them, but like, it was in a respectful way, but it was also like boundaries. Like, this is the boundary that I have. And this is how you talk to women with respect and dignity. Like, this is how you're not going to talk to me, and this is how you can talk to me. And then I would sometimes utilize their competitive nature. Like, okay, who's going to write the best metaphor then? You want to impress me? Write a metaphor. Like, so that's kind of how I would use my gender, like, to my advantage. And that's all I'll say.
Still, like, I kind of want to go off what Mika said about like not reenacting the things and that journey of what it means to like educate, because I know when I first started teaching, I just was like pulling from all the different teachers that I had and like maybe not all the best practices. So I'm wondering, like, as you've done that self-reflection and been in the space for a while, how has your practice evolved? How has the way you approach things evolved? What have you discarded, and what has come forward? I'm gonna go to Mandeep because you haven't talked.
Right on. Well, I was inspired by what Maddie was just saying because I think that for me, teaching is a profession, and being an artist is a lifestyle. It's basically who I am as a human being. And so I had to learn that to dismantle the profession of teaching and to bring forth the creativity that I engage in with artistry in the classroom and separate myself from any sort of system, right? So it doesn't matter which nonprofit or which school district or which detention facility I may be in that moment or that week, but I am not a part of that system. I am interacting with that system. And I remember my big homie told me one time, you know, the first day before I walked into the youth lockdown facility in Los Angeles in Palmdale, which is just a desert far away from any place in LA. And he told me, he said, look, when we're inside there, we're locked up too. And I never really understood what that meant. And slowly it has constantly evolved into different meanings at different times. But you become a part of the system, no matter if you're there for 1 minute or 10 years. And you start to internalize it, and then you start to regurgitate it. It's just what we were taught since we were youth, K through 12. I went to LAUSD. We were brainwashed. And so now I'm here working extremely hard to dismantle any sort of systematic thinking. So that's how I come into the classroom now. That like today, it doesn't matter that I'm here at this place or this facility. What's my vibe today? What's the vibe of these students today? Okay, the lesson plan is here. That's like fourth on my list for what I use in the day. You know what I mean? Like I have a lesson plan, but it's not really looked at until 30 minutes into the class because I'm trying to figure out what the environment is and how we can shape and mold that environment to create authentic, experiences. So that's kind of my mentality these days when I look at teaching and try to combine it with my artist self.
Yeah. Similarly, it took stepping away from teaching for a little bit for me to be like, oh, I was not doing some great things and then coming back to it. So I totally get that. You just absorb what you're in, and unless you're doing that self-reflection, unless you're coming in with that mindset of no, I'm interacting with this, I'm not this, you just naturally fall into that pattern. And I think it's something a lot of educators have to grapple with. Rashidi?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm hearing Mandeep and Maddie speak on how Maddie was saying that she started to implement questions, right? So when I first started teaching, it was like, I'm coming here, I'm teaching a routine, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here's what you're learning, right? And then as I got more seasoned, I was like, oh, okay, I should let their creativity in more. What should we add here? Saying, or is there a song you want to use, or is there a certain dance you want to put in here? And then now that I'm working with the Destiny Arts Youth Performance Company, I'm really we are creating together. We are co-creators. Yes, I'm the adult in the room and I have to handle certain things because I'm the adult. And I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to say, who's going to put something there next? I'm going to say, what should we write about? I'm going to say, what do we put on stage? What's the feeling? And I don't know, just when I started to realize that and shift that, the teaching and the experience, changed for myself. I started enjoying it a lot more because their buy-in is more. And I'm not asking them to do things like pulling their teeth, but I'm like, oh, that was your idea. Let's follow that idea. How far can we go down with that idea? And then what other ideas can we put in? And that, made, I enjoyed it more. I can also kind of, in a way, I can become a student and step back and learn from them in a real way.
I'm gonna also just toss in because all of the art forms are talking about very different, but also rooted in a lot of folks' culture, in hip hop culture, in whatever your identity may be. What are some ways that informs how you teach in your teaching practice, your identity, the culture that you're teaching from? Hi, Boo. Sorry, dog break. All right. And I also just want to point out Rashidi, Mika, and I know Aisha's also had some hands on this as well, have been working on the street dance curriculum, which, very much so traces the culture of street dance, I believe all the way back to like the 1920s and 30s, right? All the way up to today. And I think that, as a curriculum is really important that we're able to trace those roots and connect those art forms and those cultural practices to just how we operate in the classroom. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that as well.
Today's like the day that it's like public, right? I just want to say that I'm super honored that I was invited to be like an auntie to that precious like creation. And that I think the reason it felt really aligned and beautiful to be asked to collaborate was because I think as I'm hearing everyone say, like, you got to get to that moment where you reflect on like, what is your practice and what do you know needs to happen to disrupt? And I'm like filling in deep and dismantle the imbibed boo-boo that you just will accidentally replicate without any other intervention. It's like physics, right? Inertia keeps you moving in the same direction unless you're confronted by like a object moving with equal force from some other direction, right? That's why I'm not a physics teacher, because like that's totally not how that goes. But whatever. I like a metaphor. That was for you, Maddie. I was like, I wanted to enter the metaphor Olympics. I don't know. Okay. Yes. All right. So back to things I know how to talk about. But I think I went through that whole like, oh snap, I'm teaching the way that I was taught. And I think that may not be what's totally possible. And I find that it's so important to cite history and to also really tell the real story, not again the recited, imbibed one that these publishing companies get millions of dollars to replicate that are totally pro erasure of Indigenous people's genius, right? And so I just think it's totally sexy to learn the roots of stuff. I haven't met one person that learned about the roots of hip hop and was like, oh no, now it sucks. It's like, oh wow. And I think that's how we disrupt. It's not a total clear silver bullet or anything, but I think it's a really important factor in disrupting the insidious nature of appropriation. And that's a debate for a whole other topic, whether appropriating is almost innate or not. But to act against it can't just be a wish or a thought. It has to come with like active action. And some of that is like telling the right story in the first place. So yeah, most of the beautiful street dance that we have today is, there's different scholars that will call it different beautiful names, but it's African diasporic lineage. It is genetically correct, as my mama would say. And so like, even before I knew something was called hip hop, like I'm from a call and response. I'm from lean in, I'm from huddle up, I'm from like, oh, testifying with your whole body, hello, embodiment, I'm with that. And I think that there has been so much mounted to make those ways of being, of knowing, feel less than, feel informal, feel vernacular in the sense that vernacular is less than. And as somebody who's in the academy, like my classes feel like a jam all the time. And I get it. I work at Harvard, but I'm inside of that structure, but I am not of that structure. And I'm trying to recenter what I think are the most beautiful ways of knowing, the beautiful ways of learning, teaching that come from those innate communal Indigenous practices that are in all of us. And I even think in some white, if folks peel back and reclaim their ethnicity and not just traded it in for the privilege of whiteness, there's still some of that communalness that has been erased. And like, that's why colonialism messed up everybody, like literally everybody. And so I think it's just so beautiful for us to tell the story of like where these forms come from. so that we can practice appreciation, so we can practice homage, we can practice citation, right? As Dr. E. Tuck says, citation is a form of decolonization. And so it feels really beautiful anytime I could get, y'all see I get nerdy and passionate, to be like, it's African. I feel like a scene from Boys in the Hood. You from Africa, it's from Africa. Like, I think the caffeine kicked in. I'm sorry, folks. I'll act professional. But like, I get hype. And so I try to like be that hype DJ, like, yo, we gonna learn about roots and then find the connections to the right now. So I just think it's so beautiful. I'm so excited for people to get their hands on the curriculum. There's some amazing, just like heavy hitters that worked on this. I'm looking at some of them here. And there's more truth to be told so that we can all get free with knowledge instead of this colonized information that we've been privileging for so long.
When I was first thinking about this conversation before we landed where we landed, I was like, I kind of want to have this conversation about like appropriation and appreciation and what is that line and where do but we landed somewhere else. But I think it's important that we get into like the history and like really talking about the fact that, it's funny to me that the things now that I see people talking about, like, oh my God, we're gonna like do circle practice and we're gonna, and all this kind of stuff, like, especially at like the college level, people are like, oh, like, we're gonna do these out of the box ways of teaching, and they're actually not. They're just what communities do. Like, so, I think it's kind of funny to me how like now it's cool and de rigueur to like do all that kind of stuff. Anyone else?
At the Young Women's Freedom Center, we also go into facilities. We're working with young folks in lockup, and the practice of healing and indigenizing healing, right? Getting folks back to the roots of the ways that we used to take care of ourselves is like super important to us. Because I get to go home, right? Our facilitators get to go home, and they have to stay there. And one of the things I feel really blessed about is that I got to experience, like, as being somebody that was in detention, got to experience the power of programming and like people that take time out of their day to come in and work with us, right? And that is like hats off to Mandeep, hats off to Maddie, hats off to Rashidi, because that work is not easy. We get to go home and folks feel like, that it sets back in, that like, I'm not leaving here. And so at the center for us, to be able to help people reconnect to these forms of relying on faith and hope, and really asking them, like, what do you rely on? Like, who do you pray to? What keeps you hopeful is like so paramount to being able to leave when and know that we're going to come back, right? Like, and to connect folks to the ways that their ancestors did things, or the ways that their grandmama, right, or the way that their TT taught them how to do things is super important, because that's not us, right? And it's important to be able to connect to something that like continues to let them know, like, I'm going to get back to my TT, right? Or like, maybe my grandmama is not here anymore, but like, I'm connecting to her in this moment when nobody else is here, when these four walls are the only thing I have to look at, and it's hella cold, and I only got one blanket, and I got to sleep on this stupid mat, right? And so I think that that's really important about bringing in the context of like, just like those ancestral like memories and traditions that oftentimes, people wouldn't consider education or consider something that we would bring into that realm. We always start with that and we always end with that. And one of the things I've always loved about Destiny is the power of meditation, and that this is a practice to recenter ourselves, right? and teaching us that like through that recentering, we learn a little bit about ourselves every time that we do it. It's another practice that like, while some would beg to differ that it is, you know, indigenizing, because everybody's meditating now. You can get apps that teach you to meditate, right? I think the ability to recenter is like something that that I really encourage everybody to be able to learn and do and add to their practice, whether at the beginning or in those moments where like a conversation gets hard and heated, right? To just stop and recenter is super important. I also think just in terms of like history, we teach resilience and we teach resistance at the center. Like it's cool. We know about enslavement. We know about colonization. We gonna keep knowing about it. It gets taught in schools. That's not our thing. But our thing is about resistance and resiliency and being able to tap back into that too, because that is where that hope and faith lies as well. And to know that like there were people that did it before us, right? There are people that are have our backs now that are fighting for us, that as young folks, there's a whole element and way in which you're resisting and you're building your own resiliency and that you are making history in that moment. And I think all of those things are really important when we're having these conversations with young folks and engaging them.
Yeah, so Kriya, listening to you, something that came to mind is that, you know, being able to center yourself, meditation, breathing, like we are not allowed that moment either from ourselves because we feel like we have to do something else, or from the world around us because like you don't have time to stop and take a breath. But that right there is like healing. Just taking a moment, just taking one breath, you know. From someone who, you know, had whatever anger issues, and hip hop helped me dance it out, and then to like getting older and going, oh, just taking a breath could change the whole day, you know. And having that freedom to do that is really important. And then like talking about like how these dances came from the people, like all the street dances came from the people, right? It was like folks who was just doing things and here and there. It was like, oh, let's do this thing. And then it spread because it was like, oh, I'm gonna show my friend and I'm gonna show this person. And, you know, saying that's kind of how it grew, and like understanding that and like that power that we have, you know, we have the power to bring something to the world and like literally change the world. You know, I always used to talk about how like growing up, they kept saying hip hop was a fad. It's going to go away in 30 years. It's going to go away in this many years. It's not going to be around. And then like how like it permeates every like every piece of American culture, right? Even like worldwide culture, international culture, right? And like like for myself, even understanding how that connects me all the way back to the beginning. Like me being what I'm doing now inside this culture now, how that connects to the lineage of so many people who came before me, and not even like a straight line, not just straight back to Africa of like, you know, you got folks who go over to India, you go to like Thailand. It's like how it just spreads and like how that really makes us a worldwide culture, and understanding that and like being able to like relay that and stand in that and then stand in your own power. It's really, really important to allow ourselves the space to see that.
I feel like, Mandeep, did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh yeah, totally. I love what y'all were saying, and it just inspired so much, so many memories that I have. It's funny, Rashidi said India, but I always tell people when I break down hip hop and my kind of interpretation and definition of it per se is hip hop is a manifestation of our indigenous folk culture, you know what I'm saying? And the graffiti is, you know, our ancient, whatever you want to call it, hieroglyphics or our symbolism that we use. You know what I'm saying? The MC is the griot of the village who was able to speak to the king or the hierarchy or the queen or the peasant or whatever, able to go in between worlds and use the power and the magic of words. And then, of course, we have our B-girls and B-boys, you know what I'm saying, representing the manifestation of movement and also ceremony, right? And then our DJ, which is basically the drummer, you know what I'm saying, keeping that drum beat. So hip hop is a manifestation of indigenous folk culture. And I did a project called Folklok, which means folk people, where I traveled back to Punjab, which is my ancestral homeland, the land of the five rivers, North India. And we connected the folk musicians of Punjab who play Punjabi folk music to the Punjabi hip hop artists there. So it was like a whole nother layer of manifesting folk culture, where we're using folk culture of our people here and then comparing it to the folk culture of hip hop that's been adapted in India, where they're rapping in Punjabi and Hindi and Tamil and native languages, over 150 recognized native languages in India. You can imagine how many hip hop artists are going to be coming out of there. You know what I'm saying? So I love everything that y'all are bringing up, and it inspired me, brought me back memories of hip hop in India and traveling out there.
Speaking of that, like bringing in the different parts of your culture and pulling these threads together, what are some ways as artists and educators that you're doing that for your young people? What are some ways that you're pulling in their culture and their history in order to, you know, either create or to build their resiliency, and all those kinds of things? Maddie?
Sure. Yeah, let's see. One of the things that was interesting to me was recently I went to we were going to lose funding. So I went before the San Francisco Arts Commission, basically. And one of the teachers that works inside the school in juvenile hall said, like, Maddie's the only Black teacher they have. And I was like, I didn't even realize it. I was like, I'm the only Black teacher they have. They have like counselors, which are guards, but I didn't even really think about it because it just didn't really dawn on me. But then, yeah, I think like your culture is a weapon. So like, for me, hip hop actually has a very specific root in like Jamaica. Like I'm Jamaican, my dad's from Jamaica. So like Jamaicans made DJing an art form itself. So like the idea of the way we see the DJ, like that comes from Jamaica. So I know that it's like really seen in this global perspective, but like it is really important to understand like it comes from like a specific culture, like with a specific history and experience. And like when I go into spaces, I just try to like understand people's culture, people's, you know, one of the things you have to do in juvenile hall is like, because it's really racialized, like people separate and segregate, and you know, Black folks say ignorant things, and then like Latinx folks say ignorant things to each other. So I try to create solidarity in my work. So like I'll bring in poets, I'll bring in I actually bring in a lot of artists of other disciplines into the space. I've had artists like you know, sing traditional folklorico like to students, and then like the Black students are like, oh, that shit slaps, like, you know, like it'll be these like cross-cultural experiences, and I'm like, yes, solidarity. Like they don't realize like I had a whole mission behind what I was doing. So I definitely do that. And then also like yeah, just trying to understand my own culture and how it plays a role in me entering the space. And it's kind of intrinsic. I really don't know what else to say besides it's like, to me, culture is a weapon. It's always helped me. And there's a reason why there's so many like Black and brown kids in that particular situation. And that's because, you know, it's a lot of schools are sites of spirit murder, where students' spirits and their passions and their cultures are like erased or you know, and their ideas about themselves. And so I feel like just being able to, just like Kriya said about like bringing in like these are already things, the practices that are like ancestral, that like you've already used. And the last thing I'll add is, I guess it's more of a cross-cultural thing because I don't come from this particular culture, but one thing I definitely noticed because I'm working at San Francisco Juvenile Hall was like, I noticed that like a lot of Latinx students, like they would be second generation, and they would have a disconnect from their parents. Like sometimes their parents would even be like, keep them in there, like, you know what I mean? Like they didn't really like, there was a disconnect where their parents had been through a lot in their home country, but then the students were dealing with, or the young people were dealing with a lot of things. And one time there was a young woman and she just wanted to make a comic. She made a comic that told the story of like her and her parents arguing and like getting kicked out. And I was just like, that's amazing, that's beautiful. She's like, it's not a poem. And I was like, but it is though, because there's graphic memoirs now. You know what I mean? She doesn't know. I'm like, that's dope. So I definitely like try to allow for people to kind of like just express their cultures. And so the last thing I would say is, so that's two things. I try to be specific. So one, understanding my own culture, and then understanding like areas of creating boundaries too, so people aren't disrespecting one another too. So like people think that, oh, maybe just because like I'm Black, I'm gonna let something else slide, and that's not gonna happen, you know, no matter what. And so, and vice versa, like, so creating moments of solidarity is super important for me. That's like a big goal.
All right, anyone else? So much, there was so much, goodness. Okay,
I'll just say real quick, because y'all really handled that one, but I just want to chime in really quickly to just echo the sentiments of like both replicating some of the practices of hip hop in the classroom to have it be a more inclusive space, you know, those go hand in hand. And then also, well, two more things also, just recognizing is my relationship, what is my relationship to hip hop as a guest in the culture, and then also being in a constant process of like reverence and study and sharing of the history. It's like you all touched on all of it, but you're both sharing the history and you're also enacting the practices, and then also examining my own, what is my story, what is my entry point, like who am I in this, and why am I here, why am I holding space, and how.
I definitely want to ask you, because I feel like, especially with this conversation, you know, hopefully we have like lots of teaching artists, folks tuning in who are, you know, looking to improve their practice, looking to continue this conversation and get better and self-reflect. So is there anything in particular, whether that be like books, groups, I don't know, journal prompts, whatever you have, like resources to support people as they are like continuing to do this work and hopefully getting better at it? And if she wants, I just want to point out that Mika has been hosting a teaching artist think tank with Arts Education Alliance of the Bay Area. And you can go to artsedalliance.org to check out the calendar, to sign up for those. That is a dope space, as well as there's a healing circle for BIPOC creatives that is also a monthly group through Arts Education Alliance of the Bay Area. Personally, for me, has been a great space for me to just breathe. Or Rashidi was saying, take that moment that the world might not give me to like heal and center myself as both an artist and an educator. So just want to shout those two things out. Any other resources that folks can point to?
I like to give some specifics. So like, I would say as a teaching artist, one of the big things is like that balance between nurturing yourself as an artist and nurturing yourself as an educator, because to me, being a teacher is like an art form in and of itself. And so I would say like, you can actually invite young people into your own process as an artist more often than you think. I used to kind of like think there were two separate things, and I had a really, you know, it's being a woman in hip hop, it's like constant obstacle, constant challenge. But I basically, when I have an idea of a project I'm doing, I'll invite young people into that process in some ways. Like I'll be like, you know, for example, I'm coming up with a framework for this album, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna invite this young person into my process of how I might write a rap. And so I'll even tell them like, hey, you know, today I wanted to talk to you guys about this because, you know, as artists, we're basically, we're detectives in a way. So we have a question that we're asking the world. And then these are some of the conclusions we might come up with. So I would definitely just as artists, don't feel like you teaching artists rather don't feel like you have to give up yourself as an artist to be a teacher, and vice versa. Like you are valuable, you are valid. Your young people, like when you invite them into that process, you show them too that they could be artists. We need to support young people, especially BIPOC young people, being artists out here, y'all. Like, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir because all y'all know about that, but anybody else, spread the message, because we're a lot of young people, like when I'm going to juvenile halls, for example, they'd be like, oh, you're volunteering. I'm like, no, I do not volunteer. Like, I get paid to do this. And you could too. When you get out, when you become, the next Kriya, the next whoever, like you can do this too, and you can get paid, and you can make a living doing good things in the world. So yeah, that's one thing I would just say, like nurture yourself and invite young people into your own process as an artist too.
I just want to say yes to the resources that folks aren't seeing in this chat, just to give voice to. But yes, Abolitionist Teaching Network and the Arts Ed Alliance. I will say, like, I'm blanking specifics, but I don't, depending on where people are in their city, look to see if there is a network of teaching artists, or if there is a chapter of the Association of Arts Administrators of Color. I know we have a chapter here in Boston. That might also be another inroads for folks. Even if you don't have a specific resource, I love how Maddie's lifting up like practices that you can do, because oftentimes I think it's only now that we can talk about teaching artistry as a field, right? I don't know, I fell into it and I was like, yo, okay. All right. But I also want to say that there has to be space. I love lifting up, like, don't think you have to divorce your artist practice and your teaching practice, because I think there's room for us to completely interrogate what has been established as the teaching practice. Because I would argue that what artists do in the making of their work is inherently full of competencies, skills, practices that are the things that we should be just uplifting and centering, and however they attach to other goals or curricular goals or whatever, that's cool. So I want to advocate for folks, like, get to know your artist practice, and keep revisiting that. Like me as a choreographer now in my 40s versus in my 20s, like we different, because Aisha had grew up and stuff. And I had to learn the world, which means I had to go revisit, like, what am I doing? Who am I? Who am I in context? Like in this context, what is my non-negotiable? How do I let people know how to treat me, treat my artwork, treat my voice? And so I just want to encourage people to think that that is very, very fundamental to a teaching practice. As someone who left a teacher prep program, because I was like, what y'all want us to do? Kind of how, what? Now, what is this? It was the spaces of being with young people in a youth development framework. And it's just like, how do you learn how to be in a room with young people? Oh, I want to make artwork and involve the voices of young people. Like that for me was much more foundational than the getting of a teaching degree in that practice. So I just also want to lift up that, like, it's a benefit that we are here right now where there are resources, but go ahead and make it sexy to reflect on what you're doing, who you are, who you with, and make sure you got you a crew. Like, if it's not a formal network, don't be trying to do this on your own. Please no, please don't do that. We come too far for that. That's all I want to say.
I shout out to Aisha and Maddie for talking about like constantly being in your practice. My practice is organizing. My practice is being in community. And I'm going to add one to that, and that's to do your own healing, because there's a lot of adults that are spilling out their trauma onto these young people because they're not taking care of their healing. And so I know that that might have not fully been what folks wanted to hear, but you have to have a practice to decompress. You have to have a practice to be able to do your own, like have your own internal dialogue about where you feel like you're lifting up and where you feel like you're failing the folks that you're working with, right? And where you can assess like how you're moving through those practices. So in addition to that practice, like having a modality of healing, honestly, your own practice really influences the way that you show up for young people. So I say that. Be the Change Consulting has amazing trainings around how to incorporate, some of the things that we even talked about today, the facilitation, holding space, the difference between the two, right? as well as edutainment for equity. That's really about marrying the creative arts with education, and hip hop and history. And shout out to Candace Davis, who runs that program. And then the last thing that I will say is, like, I will say that as an adult who works with young people and is in youth development, I'm really like learning about the power of having my own creative outlet. None of y'all have to really worry about that. But if we're, I'm an abolitionist. And so as an abolitionist, I have to really always be thinking about like what redemption looks like, what does liberation look like, how we're getting there, and what are the alternatives to the systems, right, that exist now and that we're ultimately working to tear down. You can't do that if you can't dream and you can't imagine and you can't create. And so while I know it's not necessarily for y'all, other, educators, and other folks that work with youth, I really say to have an outlet and have a practice that helps you tap into imagination and joy and creativity, because we can't really help young people do that, when they're going to school for 6 hours a day on Zoom, and then expect them to dream and imagine and, create the world that we all want to see and believe is possible.
I know I'm like super behind. I just really started getting into like emergent strategy and pleasure activism and all that kind of stuff. And so like, yes, it's so important. It's so important that we are constantly opening our imaginations and making sure to like push that, because we are stuck as adults, tend to get stuck in what we know. This is just the way the world is. And until we can imagine something different, I don't know how we help young people imagine something different as well. That kind of leads me into the last question, but also feel free to continue responding. What is your wellness practice or, artistic practice, maybe outside of your art form that you teach, that helps you to connect and be better at your craft? Mine is cooking. Mine is cooking, which unfortunately I feel like even the folks that I do know in person have not experienced, because then we went into lockdown and I wasn't able to have people over for dinner. But if you could talk about like, Kriya, what are you doing? What are you creating that helps you stay in touch with that part of yourself?
Yeah, so actually, I create candles. I create intention candles. This is one of them. This is my creative outlet. And honestly, it's saving my life. It helps me merge like my ancestor, I believe in ancestors. I believe they're all around me. I believe that they're helping to shape the world even from the other side. It helps me tap into that. It helps me also like connect with community and offer them up, for folks that like need intention. So that's my practice. It's salt candles, salt rituals. I'm on IG. Yeah, that's what I do.
Mika, what you out here doing?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback a little bit too on like having your practice with young people be embedded in community. Like I heard a little bit from Aisha about like, don't do it alone, like have a group of collaborators or people you can bounce things off of. And also like when I was kind of in the thick of my teaching time, something that I was really important to me was to like also bring young people to like open, kind of be like, this is what's going on in the community. Like this is a festival. Obviously this is for later when there are festivals again. This is a battle. This is a, something that we can go to together to like, I can be in here in this studio setting telling you about what this art form is like. And we can be recreating some things in the studio, but let's go into the community and be in community together and practice. I don't know if anybody's on the Facebook. I was just shouting out abolitionist teaching network as a resource, as well as if you want to see like a way that an organization is showing up really powerfully. I put Rise Youth Center's Instagram in there. And for myself, I have a daily yoga practice. That's something that I was able to cultivate throughout the pandemic that has kept me from losing everything. I don't know how other dancers feel, but that particular part, and I have so many things that I'm so grateful for. So I have nothing to complain about. The part about not being able to dance and not being able to dance in community and perform and just be in person with people dancing was really devastating. That's a huge part of how I dance. And so I haven't necessarily been dancing as much, but I'm also trying to cultivate my own personal private dance practice. So yeah, but the yoga has saved my life and just gives me a chance to breathe like y'all were talking about and keep my body moving. And oh my gosh, did I miss Kai? Did I miss babies? Okay, I'm gonna stop talking.
Maddie, your personal practice or any wellness that you're doing?
I have so many because I'm all about that wellness. Rituals. One thing I've been doing lately, I'll just name one, is like I have a morning routine, which is doing four things for 15 minutes. One has to do with reading, one is writing, one is some type of movement, and one is meditation. So I have trouble with authority. Like I can't even take my own authority. So when I have too rigid, like if I have too rigid, like, oh, I'm going to do this every day, I'm going to just not do it. So it gives me enough structure with a sense of like, oh, I can like I might want to walk around the block one day, but then I got a hula hoop. So sometimes my movement is going to be me hula hooping, or like I want to read a magazine and then I want to read a book. So that's my thing right now is I like to have some type of structure, but then like have a flexibility in it. Yeah.
Shout out to that, because I know whenever I'm like, I'm gonna sit down and write for an hour. Nah, 20 minutes maybe.
Good. 20 minutes is a long time.
Rashidi?
Okay, there's a couple of things. The first thing is finding those moments, always finding those moments throughout the day where I can be quiet and finding myself alone. Usually happens like 2 a.m, but it still happens. There's a moment where I'm alone, I'm with myself. I think for me, that's something that I have to have. If I have everybody else's sounds in my head, I just lose it. So I need to shut them out for a minute so I can hear my own self a lot. And then also me having, I have a 4-year-old and a 6-month-old and a partner that I really enjoy, but the art of play, like having moments where I'm really just playing. I kind of let go of whatever else is happening that day. Even if I have a meeting later, is like, I'm gonna take this moment. I'm just gonna play with these kids real quick and just be there. It's really, it's really invigorating. It's kind of, it reminds me that play is important. I learn a lot from my kids, and I get to show them things in a different way. So yeah. And as far as my art form, like I always say that I'm fortunate because I get to do what I love. So I'm always creating, even when I'm teaching a class to a student, it's always helping me create something for myself later. When whatever I'm writing with students, it's always something like I'll put a brain drain that I did and like, oh, I should actually turn this into a song. And then I'll, recraft it into a song. But it's just allowing myself to like truly integrate my art into what I do. But the biggest thing is lately is the art of play.
Mandy?
Right on, y'all. Incorporating some of what everybody shared in the future, definitely. But right now, I keep it simple, and it's just about visiting the water, being close to the water. I'm lucky to be close to the bay, so it's like 5 minutes, just be at the water. And I try to go every day. But yeah, that's been helping a lot. Just trying to detach from the matrix. So just keeping it simple and being in nature.
Aisha.
I feel like this, I'm glad I got to go last because now I got like, ooh, let me try this 4 by 15. I need to start with a 3 by 10. It's fine. I definitely went on to the IG page, Kriya. Yes, I know exactly which candles, plural, I will be ordering. I want to lift up something that Mika said, like as a dancer and as an educator, like I thought like there's no way you put this on. I'm an in-person live experience, honey. And so I really went into a low place. And it took honestly about 6 months for me to feel like, okay, I want to and I can put my feet underneath my hips and stand up. I struggled with like dancing online because I'm like, there's no sweaty people next to me. What's happening? As a dance teacher, I look like real rhythmless nation because of the Zoom drag. So it became like I found myself like for some kind of way, like as this person who loves moving and being in my body, like the way that felt so natural and restorative for me now felt like really hampered by all of these technological and physically distant challenges. And so I still haven't gotten back into dance class, but I have really feel like I want to just lift up Same. Feel like I have figured out how to define what is a meditation for me. And if there were hidden cameras in my place, my meditation looks something like journaling, prayer, down dog, twerk, roll on the floor, jump up and down, cry, and stand in mountain pose. All within like 10 minutes. But when I do that, because it is unscripted and I just let it be, because I can't start in stillness, then I feel more in touch with myself. I feel like I have a way of remembering my mind, my body, my spirit, my soul, to be able to keep my feet under my hips and stay upright. So I'm noticing when I don't do that, like the rest of the week, not even the day, the rest of the week is like it's a miss. So I'm learning to really prioritize at least 15 minutes for myself to let whatever is going to come out, come out. And then a second little hidden thing is like, I love decorating spaces and acting like I'm very crafty and the star of my own HGTV show. And I think because for me, being able to transform the space to like really cultivate the energy that I need, like feels like I can fix this. I can't fix why there's even a trial for a police officer that clearly murdered a Black man. Can't fix that. I can't. And that will spend me for hours, days. But I can fix this room to make space for me and make room for me to like jump around, roll, twerk, meditate, pray, cry, call my mama, and feel okay. And so it's not necessarily the most cost effective practice, but I have really gotten into like taking what I can and being on some kind of budget to like make a space feel like I can be okay in.
Thank you. I love it. Thank you so much. All right. Unfortunately, we are at the end of our time. I really, really, again, want to thank you for being here. Like I said at the beginning, this is a crazy time. And like, if I could nap most of the day, I would. But I think it's so important, all of the stuff that we're talking about, all of the stuff that y'all are doing as artists, as educators. And I'm just really grateful that we're in a different place, that there are resources, that there are folks thinking about these things and how they work with young people, how they work with each other and other artists. And this community is just lovely and beautiful. And now I'm just getting flowery and emotional. So we're gonna finish just like we finish most Destiny events. Just a couple quick announcements before we get into the end. Our next Creating Connection panel, and our last one for the spring will be on May 19th, and it'll be hosted by the Destiny Anti-Racism Task Force, which is a group of young people that I have been working with to talk about anti-racism, and they're going to present kind of on the process, what they've learned, what they've been doing. I'm really excited for everybody to see the work that they've done. You can also check out our Destiny T Public store, where we have lots of cool designs, some limited edition stuff, you know, so go in there, you know, get your Destiny merch. And before we go, we're gonna put our fist in the center. I'm gonna ask everybody to unmute and put your fist in the center. Our word for this evening is going to be liberation. I appreciate all the work that y'all do to liberate us as community, to liberate us as a nation. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Liberation.
Liberation.
Thank you for joining us, and we will see y'all on May 19th.
Thank you. Thank you, Shannon.
Much respect to you all.
Yes,
Appreciate
yes.
y'all. Have a good one.
Thank you all.